The story takes place in the kingdom of Laner, part of the Oran Empire. A teacher was explaining to her students that, with proper concentration, they would be able to sense the magic around them. However, one of the students was skeptical. He felt frustrated to be there, learning the basics of magic with children, when he should have already advanced further. This young man is the protagonist of the story, named Lin Lanster. For 8 years, he has been trying to learn magic at the most basic level, while other children his age have already mastered simple spells. Lin, on the other hand, cannot even perceive the magical particles in his surroundings. Even so, Lin cannot afford to give up. He has a mission. He needs to become a sage-level mage to discover an important truth. While he was reflecting on this, he was suddenly hit by something. A boy came running up to Lin, apologizing and claiming that he got carried away with the practice of magic. However, Lin knew that it had been intentional. The boy was mocking him for being a noble who couldn't use magic. The boys continued to taunt Lin, but he could not retaliate. In this world, nobles are expected to have powerful and dominant magical abilities. As the taunting continued, a knight intervened. Lin asked the knight to lower his sword, which he promptly did, giving the children the opportunity to flee. Lin then explained to the knight that his sword should not be used against commoners. The knight apologized and explained the reason for his visit. Lin had received a letter from a man named Mr. Oliver. Mr. Oliver was the man who hid Lin after the tragic accident that took his parents' lives. He also knew of Lin's difficulty with magic and had been helping him since then. After the conversation, Lin returned to the mansion where he lived. There, he was greeted by Blin Lannister, his mother's older brother. Lin called him father, as they were hiding the real Lin from something dangerous. The two went to the study room, where they read Mr. Oliver's letter. Blin used his magic on a paper bird, which then began to speak. The bird said that there was something that could help Lin finally learn magic. It then conjured a magical book and handed it to Lin. As he held the book, Lin remembered the countless times he had tried to learn magic without success. Now, he wondered if this time would be different. Blin noticed the sadness on Lin's face and tried to cheer him up, saying that he could continue living there and pretending to be his son for as long as he needed. The truth is that Lin was abandoned by his father and has since carried the responsibility of becoming a sage-level mage to uncover the mysteries of his past. However, Lin believed that something had happened because his father loved him very much and would not have abandoned him without reason. This thought gave him even more determination to learn magic. Later that night, while lying in bed, Lin looked at the magic book and remembered his childhood. His father was not always home, but he always brought something to cheer Lin up when he returned. This memory was of the last time Lin saw his father. Supposedly, it would be his father's final expedition before the family could spend more time together, but he never returned, and his mother also disappeared. Lin was left alone and realized that the only way to understand what had happened was to learn magic. Now, he hopes the book can help him achieve his goal. Determined to try once more, Lin began to meditate. Blue auras started to surround him, but with his eyes closed, he didn't notice anything. Lin thought he had failed again, but suddenly he saw orbs around him and realized that he could finally sense the magic. This renewed his hopes and made him very happy. However, something strange happened. He started shaking violently, feeling like his body was about to explode. Lin knew he couldn't let that happen and gathered all his strength to resist. Suddenly, everything went dark. He was transported to an unknown place, and while trying to figure out how to get out of there, he felt something in his hands. Lin found a red egg, and as he held it, a notification appeared. A system introduced itself as Lin's butler and explained that it had been waiting for him for about 10 years. The system also informed him that this place belonged to Lin and was called Dragon Rent. Lin was transported again, this time to a small island. He began processing the information he had received and immediately thought of the dangerous dragon that might be linked to the egg. The system confirmed that the egg was a dragon's and that this would be Lin's first dragon. The butler explained that Lin would need to raise the dragon before he could return to his world. Lin was irritated because he knew that raising a dragon was an immense task, and he feared being devoured by it. Over time, the egg began to hatch. The butler warned Lin that he needed to spill some blood on the egg, or the dragon would indeed eat him alive. With no other option, Lin bit his thumb and pressed his hand against the egg, which was about to open. A beam of red light appeared above the egg, and the system informed him that the bonding process had been successful. A baby red dragon emerged, and Lin could hardly believe that this tiny creature would one day become the most fearsome being in the world. The dragon's eyes were still covered by fragments of the eggshell, and it ended up bumping into Lin's knees. The protagonist helped the dragon remove the remaining shell from its head. However, the baby dragon got annoyed, not wanting to be touched by a human, and kicked Lin in the face. At that moment, Lin had confirmation that this creature was indeed a dragon. A series of notifications appeared, informing Lin that he had earned 1 gold and 5 experience points for having his first dragon. In the game, gold is equivalent to real-world gold and can be used to expand the ranch. A new quest appeared, asking Lin to create a fire habitat for the dragon. While navigating through the system, the little dragon continued to complain, refusing to accept anything from Lin. The fire habitat cost 100 gold, and Lin decided to buy it. He placed it on the small island, and as soon as it was built, he received an additional 5 experience points and 50 gold. This fire habitat allows the fire dragon to level up once per day and offers a limit of 500 gold per day, enabling the fire dragon to grow 1 level per day. He immediately dove into the lava, and since the only thing he could say was Ano, Lin decided to name him that. Shortly after Ano received his habitat, he fell asleep. Lin then decided to carry out more tasks suggested by the system. He set up some fruit farms to feed Ano. Since Lin had already completed the tutorial, he could leave the ranch with a simple gesture. Lin was slowly transported back to his world, and his body fell onto the bed. When he woke up, he found 3 people looking at him, all with worried expressions. Lin asked why they were in his room, and they told him they saw him floating on the ceiling. Lin had broken the ceiling but was confused as to why they seemed so happy. Mr. Blin revealed that Lin had released a very powerful magical energy while he was unconscious. Incredulous, Lin tried to use magic again, and to his surprise, it worked. He believed this was thanks to the book Mr. Oliver had given him. While the other 2 celebrated, Lin interrupted them. He asked Mr. C to follow the book's instructions to cultivate magic, but Mr. C couldn't sense anything, just like Uncle D. It was then that Mr. Blin found out about the ranch, and Lin realized he was the only one who could access that place. Every time he tried to tell someone about the ranch, the system prevented him. Lin tried cultivating magic again, but his body still couldn't handle the magical energy, and he continued to cough up blood. The system then informed Lin that his magic level was directly linked to his dragon's level. Since Ano wasn't yet at level 1, Lin couldn't use magic. If he absorbed more magical power, his body might explode. Lin tried to avoid returning to the ranch, but soon notifications started appearing. Ano's food supply was quickly running out. The system even scolded him for being an irresponsible farmer. His uncle noticed something was wrong since Lin stopped eating. Lin then made up an excuse, saying he had lost his appetite. His uncle also told him that he planned to send him to St. Iris Magic Academy. This was the most prestigious academy in the Oran Empire, where Mr. Oliver was the vice-rector. It was also where Lin's father graduated, and Lin was happy to have the chance to study there. But then, new warnings appeared. Ano's health was below 10%, in critical condition. If Ano died, Lin would have to turn into a dragon egg to make up for this loss, which panicked Lin. He had no idea that was even possible. From that moment on, our protagonist started feeding Ano daily. Ano's appetite was enormous, and he soon leveled up. Lin tried to make a friendly gesture, but Ano didn't like it. He didn't want anyone touching his head. The system informed Lin that he was becoming a qualified farmer. Now that his fire dragon had reached level 1, Lin could finally use magic. Additionally, he unlocked a new feature called the training room. Lin was transported to this room, where he was given the task of meditating while maintaining a specific position. He needed to balance himself correctly to avoid being hit by a 40-ton hammer, but as expected, Lin lost his balance and was struck. The plank trapped his feet, preventing him from escaping the training. His first challenge was to meditate for more than 5 seconds, and Lin was already struggling to keep his balance. As time passed, the challenge became more difficult. He continued meditating on top of these obstacles. After some time, a notification informed him that he had completed the training session. Lin proceeded with the training, and 7 days passed. He then decided to try using his magical perception. A magic circle appeared in his hands, and shortly afterward, he cast a small fireball. The protagonist was a little disappointed because the amount of magic was still small. He then decided to extinguish the fire before anyone saw it. But at that moment, he spotted a boy named Jack, who was with Mr. C and Mr. Blin when Lin began floating last time. Jack ran back to the mansion to tell everyone that his master had used magic. Lin tried to stop him, embarrassed by the size of his small fireball, but then, something unexpected happened. The fire magic almost hit Jack. Lin realized that his fire magic had strengthened. With this, he decided to practice his skills more. Lin continued chasing Jack, who was running for his life. On that same day, Mr. Blin received an acceptance letter from St. Iris Academy. His uncle immediately told Lin, and both were happy. After some preparations, Lin was ready to travel to the academy, and everyone bid him farewell. Now, he was officially beginning his journey to become a mage. The journey would take at least a month. During the day, Jack led the convoy to the academy, and at night, Lin used the time to train. While he was focused on his training, Lin didn't realize how much Ano had grown. Charmander had now become a Charizard, and Ano had reached level 3, gaining new abilities. His fire breath was more powerful, which made Lin very pleased. He even invited Ano to go out and explore the world. After that, Lin was transported back to his world, taking Ano with him. At that very moment, a man with a black dragon sensed Ano's presence. He was intrigued because he had detected a dragon outside the Rift Valley. He then opened his eyes and began observing the surroundings. The fire dragon seemed excited, as the place was much larger than the ranch. He suggested they fly to explore the area. While interacting with Ano, Lin decided that since he couldn't get rid of the system, he would use its resources to the fullest. Lin decided to raise his dragons to become a more powerful mage. But then, an arrow nearly hit them. He thought it was the work of dragon hunters, but upon further investigation, he discovered it was an ambush. He also heard Jack shouting for help. Jack had been captured along with 2 guards and was surrounded by snakes. The boy had gone out in search of food while his master was busy training. He spotted a caravan while walking, but suddenly, a group of men appeared, defeating the guards protecting the caravan and capturing Jack. Those who tried to flee or resist were bitten by the snakes and ended up turning into corpses. The leader of the caravan tried to plead for his life with the thieves, but it was in vain. The chief of the thieves decided to continue the slaughter. Jack thought he would no longer be able to serve Lin, as he was about to die. However, before the snake could bite him, a fireball appeared and burned the snakes, freeing Jack. Someone descended from the sky and stepped onto the ground beside him. It was Lin. Jack was immensely relieved to see his master, but he soon realized there was an even bigger problem. The number of thieves was too large. Some of the thieves were frightened by the fireball Lin had cast, believing him to be at least a 3rd-tier mage. The leader of the thieves, however, assured his men there was no need to fear, as he himself was a 3rd-tier knight. He knew he had the advantage in close combat, since mages need to chant spells before attacking. Lin was aware of this and did his best to dodge the attacks, but the thief was very fast, proving himself to be a 3rd-tier knight. One of the strikes hit Lin directly, causing significant damage. Despite the pain, Lin stood up but realized he couldn't keep dodging forever. He began to chant a spell, which gave the knight another opportunity to attack. The chief of the thieves mocked Lin, throwing him against a rock, saying that mages would never be a match for knights. Even after all these blows, Lin was still conscious. At that moment, the system appeared and informed Lin that, since he was in combat, the dragon's magic would now synchronize with him. This would allow Lin to use Ano's abilities, such as Shield, Claw, Bite, and the ability to cast fireballs instantly. Lin remembered these abilities because they were the same as Ano's. The system confirmed that he could indeed use these spells. While Lin was busy synchronizing, the knight hit him with another kick to the face. The leader of the thieves had had enough fun and decided to finish Lin off. But just as he was about to be cut down, Lin managed to activate the synchronization system. He then spun his body and unleashed the instant fireball ability. The chief of the thieves recoiled. His sword was melted by Lin's spell, and the situation changed. The primary disadvantage of mages had disappeared. Lin could now cast spells without needing to chant them at length. The thieves quickly changed their attitude towards Lin, admiring his power. However, Lin was already tired and told them to leave. The leader of the caravan, Lucas, approached Lin and thanked him for saving them. He then showed Lin a mysterious object they had found along the way and offered it as a token of gratitude. Lucas removed the cloth covering the object and revealed a maiden. Lin immediately recognized her features. The young woman, with her pointed ears, was clearly an elf. Lucas boasted, saying that no man could resist her charms, but Lin didn't see the situation the same way. He was furious. Lucas suggested that Lin not hold back and told him how they had captured the elf. They found her on a battlefield where mercenaries fought each other to capture her. Lucas mentioned that the elf could be sold for 1,000,000 gold and seized the opportunity to suggest that Lin join them, knowing the protagonist's power would be valuable to their business. Lucas planned to hire even stronger men to expand his operations. Lin held the cage where the elf was imprisoned and thanked Lucas for the offer, but then cast a fire spell on the cage, burning the rope and freeing the elf. Lucas tried to stop Lin, but it was already too late. The protagonist was outraged to see that this man treated life as a commodity. Lucas was terrified and tried to flee, but Lin launched a small fireball at him, making him run for his life. The guards accompanying Lucas didn't even attempt to confront Lin and also fled. As for Lin, he extended his hand to the elf, but she was still frightened and didn't know what to do. Lin assured her that he was there to help, and she finally trusted him. The elf thanked him for rescuing her from those men. Lin introduced himself and asked her name, but the elf, embarrassed and impressed by Lin's chivalry, hid her face. He said she didn't need to answer if she didn't want to. As he was about to walk away, the elf finally shouted her name, Nick. Nick was afraid that by revealing her name to Lin, he would abandon her. After that, they returned to the carriage, where Jack was preparing a meal. Nick, the elf, was starving and devoured almost all the food, but Lin didn't mind. He was pleased to be able to help Nick. He then asked why she chose to stay with them, even though she had the chance to return to her clan. Nick explained that she couldn't go back. She was too mischievous and had broken the elves' rule of not getting involved with humans. When she returned home, she found that her base had already been discovered by adventurers and that her clan had fled. She tried to hide to avoid being captured, but the guards found and chased her. Despite her attempts to escape, Nick was captured. Lin understood the trauma this had caused Nick and asked why she wasn't afraid of him, even though he was human. Nick replied that he was different from other humans. After all, he had saved her. This made her look at Lin with admiration. Lin then allowed her to stay with him while they searched for clues about the whereabouts of her clan. He also explained that he was traveling to study magic at an academy. Lin asked Nick if she could pretend to be his servant to avoid suspicion. Nick's expression changed when she heard the word servant, and she tried to hide her embarrassment. Lin panicked, not wanting her to misunderstand. After explaining the situation better, Nick finally agreed. Lin then left her alone and stepped out of the carriage. Little Jack asked his master why he was going to sleep outside. He thought his master was planning something with the elf. After a few days, Lin's carriage finally arrived at the academy. The system appeared and gave Lin a new task. He should explore the academy to unlock the water dragon egg. When Lin learned that he was about to encounter other dragons, his expression became serious. The system explained that the more dragons he acquired, the more powerful he would become. The system also showed Lin's current status as a farmer. He was a first-tier mage and, so far, had only one dragon. Additionally, it revealed that there are 6 types of dragon eggs: fire, water, wind, earth, light, and darkness. If Lin managed to gather all these eggs, he would master all the magic associated with them. This further motivated Lin, who quickly entered the academy, but not before bidding farewell to Jack and Nick. Upon entering the academy, Lin was impressed by the sophistication of the place. He saw a delivery service where the vehicle was a broom. students excited to study, and various activities in progress. A man approached and asked Lin to follow him, as he needed to take the admission test first. Meanwhile, inside the test room, people were talking, expecting that the student recommended by Mr. Oliver would have at least a medium level of skill. Lin arrived at the test room, where he was greeted by a professor who explained that he would conduct the test. Lin said he was ready, and the professor, appreciating his confidence, asked him to place his hand on a blue orb. However, Lin began to worry that someone might discover his secret about the ranch. The system reassured him, explaining that the magic crystal only measured magical talent and couldn't detect the ranch. Confident, Lin placed his hand on the crystal, believing his magical talent would be high since his father was a genius in magic. The crystal trembled and displayed a bright red color. The professor, impressed, initially thought Lin had supreme talent, especially considering Mr. Oliver's personal recommendation. However, when the test was completed, the crystal indicated that Lin had only weak magical talent and a minimal affinity with the fire element. Everyone in the room was stunned. The system explained to Lin that his magical talent was directly linked to his level as a farmer and the level of his dragons. The people around began to whisper, questioning his abilities, and even Augustine, the president of the Truth Student Union, showed disappointment. As soon as Lin saw him, the system gave him a new mission: to defeat Augustine to obtain water dragon egg fragments. Augustine approached Lin, demanding that he hand over his badge and uniform immediately, showing his displeasure with how Lin had been admitted to the academy. This reminded Lin of the times he was underestimated and bullied by other children. In response, he told Augustine that the real person tarnishing the academy's reputation was him, by bullying a fellow student. Augustine was left speechless, but his followers were quick to respond. Lin remained calm, knowing that at his current level, he wouldn't stand a chance against Augustine, so he decided to walk away, recognizing the need to grow stronger. After the incident, Lin returned to the dragon ranch. The dragon fruits were ready, but there was a problem. The dragon had grown and needed a larger habitat. Lin told the dragon that he would have to be patient, as it would take 2 more days to gather the necessary gold to expand the habitat. However, Ano was irritated, reminding Lin that he had said the same thing 2 days earlier. Lin tried to calm him, realizing that Ano was starting to act like a child. Lin began thinking about how to get a bigger habitat for Ano, but he encountered the problem that the current habitat only produced 500 gold per day, while the larger habitat cost around 10,000 gold. Faced with this, Lin almost gave up but decided to keep going, planning to earn more gold through extra work or any other means. As he was getting ready, he thought Nick had called him because breakfast was ready. When he opened the door, he saw Nick dressed as a maid, and it seemed like flowers were blooming around her when he saw her. Nick, embarrassed, asked her master if there was something wrong with her appearance. Lin assured her that she looked beautiful and that there was no problem at all. He also apologized to Nick for needing her to pretend to be his maid temporarily, but Nick didn't mind, saying she trusted her master. After that, Lin prepared to go to the academy but realized that things had changed due to the results of his admission test the day before. People around him began to treat him coldly. Lin picked up his class schedule and went to his first class. As he entered the room, he was interrupted by a teacher, Ms. Aisha, who had been assigned to that class. The teacher scolded Lin, saying that he couldn't just use his connections to be admitted to the academy and that she wouldn't allow him to attend her class. The students started mocking Lin, and he asked the system to analyze the magical talent of the other students. Even with a dog in the room, Lin knew that none of them seemed to be better than him. Before leaving, he asked the teacher what the lesson was about and said he was willing to prove that he was smarter than all the other students in the room. The students laughed again, but the teacher silenced them, intrigued by Lin's proposal. She gave him a week to prepare for the magical potion exam, saying that if he managed to get first place, she would accept him into her class. Otherwise, he would have to leave the academy. What seemed like a simple bet turned into something more serious than expected. The system created a new task with the same conditions imposed by Professor Aisha. If Lin managed to secure first place, he would receive a water dragon egg. Confident, Lin thought that since the system had turned this into a task, he would be able to accomplish it. He accepted the challenge, and the teacher was impressed by Lin's determination, thinking that perhaps the rumors about him were wrong. At that moment, Professor Isa became interested in Lin. In the academy library, Lin went to seek more information about the potions he needed to study since he couldn't attend the classes. He was impressed by the grandeur of the library and hoped to find many books on potion making. However, while searching for the books, the students who saw him started whispering, which irritated him, especially because he was there to learn, not to cause trouble. It was then that a lady intervened, telling the students to be quiet and saying they should be ashamed of themselves. She warned the older students that if they didn't maintain discipline in the library, they would lose points. She was the library counselor, and the students couldn't afford to lose points. Lin found the lady very kind and was grateful that she had prevented a problem. The counselor even apologized to Lin for what had happened, taking responsibility for not being able to maintain order in the library. Lin was speechless at her attitude, impressed by her sense of responsibility. Seizing the opportunity, he asked where he could find books on magical potions. The counselor agreed to help him and introduced herself as Vivian. With a simple magical gesture, Vivian made the books Lin needed appear before him. She explained that those were all the magical potion books in the academy, but she warned him that the exam would be practical and that just reading the books might not be enough for him to pass. At that moment, the system gave Lin a hint on how to prepare for the exam. Confident, he told Vivian that she didn't need to worry and thanked her for her help. Lin mentioned that she was the first person to help him, even after hearing the rumors about him, and promised to invite her for a meal after the exam. After that, he left the library, but something continued to trouble Vivian. She wondered if she had acted in a certain way under the influence of someone who had guided her to get closer to Lin. The previous apology wasn't just out of her responsibility as the library counselor, but for another reason. Back at his residence in the academy, Lin spent the entire day studying the books, eager to learn how to create magical potions. Only 1 week remained until the exam. 5 days later, he was exhausted, but all his effort was worth it because he discovered the most important secret of potions. The creation process requires a very stable mental power. Beginners who lack this stability often use dragon saliva as an additional ingredient. If the saliva is authentic, the potion's potency increases significantly, allowing even ordinary people to create magical potions. Lin had uncovered all these details. On the day of the exam, he successfully created his potion. Some students suspected that Lin was cheating, but those who spread the rumors were punished by Professor Isa. Lin thanked the teacher for her actions, and she, in turn, was impressed as she didn't expect him to be able to produce a high-quality potion. She used her magic to inspect Lin's potion and said that if no other student could match its quality, he would receive the highest grade. However, she warned that it wouldn't end there. To prove that he hadn't cheated, Lin would need to demonstrate his ability in front of everyone. Lin was invited to step onto the podium and create a new potion. Although he wasn't happy with the situation, as he was being unjustly accused, he accepted the challenge. Other students were eager to see him fail, some even claiming that Lin had used Dragon Sept and couldn't accept that he had surpassed them in just 7 days. Lin smiled, knowing that he had been training inside the Dragon Ranch, where time passed 7 times slower than in the outside world. He stood up and began preparing the new potion. Professor Ai was surprised by how easily Lin accepted the challenge. As he added the ingredients, Lin recalled the countless failed attempts that had led him to perfect his craft. Now, he was ready to show his true talent. The teacher noticed that Lin had excellent mental control and recognized that he was better than any other student she had ever taught. After some time, Lin finished the potion, which had the same quality as the first. Professor Isa asked Lin if he had been born with a strong ability to concentrate. Lin replied that he hadn't, but that the training the system provided made him stronger. He even became emotional as he remembered everything he had gone through. At that moment, Professor Isa understood how much Lin had worked to make up for his lack of talent and felt ashamed for almost causing his expulsion. Professor Isa admitted her mistake and apologized to Lin. She also revealed that 5 other students managed to create potions of a similar level to Lin's, but since he learned on his own and had less time to prepare, she awarded him the highest grade. The system notified Lin that he had completed the mission, gaining experience, a fragment of the water dragon egg, and a teleportation matrix. After the exam, Lin left the room and decided to relax. The system congratulated him, and he felt that he couldn't afford to lose this challenge, as he didn't want to tarnish his father's legacy at the academy. Moreover, since he still had some dragon saliva left, Lin planned to use it to create high-quality potions, which he would sell to earn gold and buy a larger habitat for Anno. With his first major problem at the academy resolved, Lin thought of Vivian and decided to visit her to offer her a meal. However, when he arrived at the library, he couldn't find her. At that moment, a lady approached and asked if he was Lin. He found the lady a bit strange and tried to step back but answered that yes, he was Lin. The lady then said that Vivian was behind the school building and had something important to confess to him. Upon hearing this, Lin was confused, not knowing how to react, but the lady urged him to go find Vivian immediately. Moreover, an unusual mission appeared. In exchange for a fragment of the water dragon egg, Lin needed to be carried like a princess by Vivian. This irritated him, as the mission seemed extremely strange. The lady insisted that he hurry, saying that Vivian wouldn't leave that spot until she met Lin. She then summoned a bee and told Lin to follow it. Lin began to suspect that something was wrong. He found it unlikely that Vivian would confess her feelings like this, so suddenly, especially since they had only met once. Additionally, this mission seemed like a joke compared to the previous ones. As he followed the bee, Lin heard a voice in the distance and quickly ran toward it, thinking it might be Vivian. When he reached the source of the voice, Lin encountered something unexpected. He approached the center of the area and wondered why the academy would have something like this. Lin examined a portal and saw something strange. Vivian had entered this portal and, at that moment, seemed to be waiting for another participant. Lin was clearly confused when suddenly someone appeared behind him and cast a magical wave that hit him. Lin tried to turn around, but the magic pushed him toward the portal. It was too late. He was pulled into the portal. The person who cast the magic was actually the same lady from the library, who was in disguise. This student was actually a man using magic to hide his identity. He was furious because he had also been bullied by his superiors, but no one had ever protected him. Jealous that Vivian had helped Lin, he planned to throw both of them into a desperate situation. Lin was transported to the other side of the portal and found himself facing sharp objects on the ground. Shortly after, he saw Vivian trapped above him, gagged and struggling to free herself from the chains. While Lin was still trying to understand the situation, he felt something behind him. Turning his head, he saw a huge magical beast emerging from the portal. The beast let out a loud howl, nearly causing Lin to fall into the spikes. He hadn't expected to encounter a magical beast inside the portal. Without wasting any time, the beast charged at Lin, who knew he had to dodge quickly to avoid being killed. Gathering his strength, Lin jumped before the attack could hit him. From the cracks in the ground, he realized that the beast was extremely powerful. Lin then noticed that he had jumped higher than he expected and remembered that because of the mission he completed, his level had increased. He was now a second-tier mage, but he still didn't imagine that a simple level increase could improve his abilities so much. With this, he gained confidence that he could defeat the beast. However, when the creature charged again, its bite nearly hit Lin, who barely managed to dodge. He realized that his body could now keep up with the speed of the magical beast. After dodging enough, Lin decided to counterattack and unleashed his fireball ability, striking the beast and knocking it down. Lin was relieved to see that his attack worked, but he soon realized that the chains holding Vivian began to break one by one, causing her to fall toward the spikes. He tried to save her but was too late. Fortunately, some chains held, preventing Vivian from falling into the spikes. Lin was furious with himself for focusing so much on the fight and forgetting about Vivian. He began to think about why the chains had suddenly broken and noticed that the beast had destroyed some of the spikes when it fell. Lin deduced that by destroying the spikes, the chains were also affected. Now, the protagonist began to think of ways to destroy the spikes and save Vivian. He told her to wait while he sought help from the academy mages. Vivian tried to say something, but her mouth was gagged. Lin knew that the only way out was through the portal, but when he turned around, he realized that the entrance had disappeared. He then remembered the lady who was probably behind this trap, the the same one who had pushed him into the portal. Lin began to wonder why someone would want to kill them. While he was still trying to find answers, the magical wolf that had fallen got up again, ready to attack Lin. He knew he couldn't afford to be interrupted, so he launched another instant fireball, defeating the wolf. A notification appeared, informing Lin that he had defeated a ghost wolf and gained some experience. He asked the system for more information about the ghost wolf, but the system replied that he would have to figure it out on his own. Frustrated, Lin was about to dismiss the system, but then he noticed something. A purple orb emerged from the wolf's body and moved toward Vivian. It seemed that Lin had discovered something important. Every time he defeated a ghost wolf, the orb moved, bringing Vivian closer to a safe place. Additionally, if he destroyed the spikes, the chains would loosen. Excited by this discovery, Lin realized something else. The ghost wolf he had defeated had split into two. This surprised him, as it made the fight even more challenging. He remembered something he had read about the experimental realm, where third-year students conducted simulated battles against demonic beasts. If someone passed the test, the participants were automatically transported out. Lin thought that maybe this realm worked the same way, and now he had no choice but to fight the monsters. Lin continued gaining experience points as he defeated more wolves. He planned to persist until Vivian was in a safe place. However, over time, the number of beasts began to overwhelm Lin. The ghost wolves had already split so many times that he was reaching the limit of his strength. Surrounded, Lin knew something like this was inevitable. A ghost wolf charged at him, and Lin remembered that he could use all the dragon's abilities, in addition to the fireball. He also had the shield and claw abilities. Using the shield ability, a small shield appeared, which he used to block the wolf's attack. However, as more wolves attacked, the shield began to crack, and Lin was struggling to keep up. Finally, he managed to knock one of the wolves off the platform. Our protagonist used another ability called Claw to fend off the remaining wolves. Lin received a notification that he had defeated a wolf, but from what he saw, the Claw ability didn't cause as much damage as he had expected. A purple orb appeared behind him, and he realized that the wolf that had fallen off the platform couldn't split into two, finally being defeated. With this, Lin understood what he needed to do to pass this trial. He conjured his fire magic along with the claw ability and faced the ghost wolves head-on. He knew that if he could make them fall off the cliff, he could defeat them. One by one, Lin managed to execute his plan. All the wolves were defeated, and at the same time, Vivian was freed from the chains that bound her. Lin reassured her, saying that everything was fine now and that, since they had defeated the wolves, he expected they would be transported back. However, the two heard a sound, and a staircase suddenly appeared within the realm. After that, Vivian healed Lin's wounds with her magic and began to cry, apologizing for putting him in a difficult situation. Lin calmed her down, saying that she didn't need to apologize, as it wasn't her fault. They had bigger problems to solve, such as the staircase they found, which led further down into the realm. Since they hadn't been transported back, Lin concluded that the trial wasn't over yet. He asked Vivian if she knew anything about the realm of judgment, but she apologized again, explaining that she wasn't familiar with it. Detailed information about the realm was reserved for senior students. Without information about the place, Lin suggested they explore on their own and promised to protect Vivian. However, she refused the promise, gathering magic around her and telling Lin that she would fight by his side. Lin was surprised, but soon a bat appeared out of nowhere, and the brave Vivian ran to hide behind him for protection. Our protagonist took the opportunity to tease her. Then, the two began descending the stairs, and the fog around them started to dissipate. Vivian heard some noises and noticed that the stairs behind them were beginning to collapse. They ran for their lives, but the stairs ended up falling. Lin was about to call Ano to stop them from falling, but Vivian used her wind magic to carry them to a safe place. Lin felt relieved, as he didn't know that Vivian was capable of using such powerful wind magic. However, the system interrupted the moment, congratulating Lin for completing the mission. Lin leveled up but didn't learn any new skills, as Ano was still unhappy about not having a larger habitat. After some time, Vivian and Lin reached the bottom of the realm, where there was an island leading to a portal. The bodies of the wolves were also there, and Lin suspected that someone wouldn't let them leave so easily. He asked Vivian to step back while he checked for any traps. Lin threw a stone, which activated a glowing tile. Immediately, the statue above the portal launched a laser spell toward them, and they barely managed to dodge it. Lin was irritated because, instead of attacking the tile activated by the stone, the statue targeted them directly. Moreover, they noticed that the statue began to crack, and the stone transformed into a wolf pup. Seeing this, Lin was reminded of when Ano was born. Both found the pup adorable but knew that behind that cute appearance was deadly power. The wolf pup let out a howl, sending sound waves throughout the area, and the ghost wolves began to move again. The pup's howl had revived the ghost wolves. Lin then realized that to escape from there, they would need to defeat the wolf pup first. He started attacking the wolves with his claw ability, while Vivian conjured a spell to help him. The spell headed toward the wolf pup but was blocked by an immunity shield. Vivian began to lose hope of defeating the pup, recalling a traumatic experience from her past. She had also been rescued from a demon beast with magic immunity. Everyone who was with her died, and she was the only survivor. This painful memory started to haunt her again, but Lin decided that he wouldn't give up. He assured her that as long as he was there, he would find a way to survive and pass the trial, promising that he wouldn't let anything happen to her. This scene reminded Vivian of another memory, where she was being protected by a powerful aquatic creature against a demon beast. She realized that she couldn't just stand by while everyone else fought for their lives. Vivian gripped her staff again, gathering courage and deciding that she was no longer the helpless child she once was. She then attacked the wolf pup with a physical strike, surprising both Lin and the wolves, who didn't expect such an attack. This small opening was enough for Lin to come up with an idea on how they could defeat the wolf pup. He told Vivian that he would cast a fireball to clear a path, and that her task would be to hold off the wolves for 30 seconds. Executing the plan, Lin launched an instant fireball, which burned most of the wolves. Seizing the opportunity, the two advanced toward the wolf pup. Lin flew while Vivian ran toward the portal. Lin had a brilliant idea. Since magic couldn't reach the pup, he would use brute force. Suddenly, he became like Saitama from One Punch Man and started bombarding the wolf pup with punches. Finally, the magic circle protecting the pup began to break, causing Lin to smile with satisfaction. He continued his assault while Vivian held back the wolves with her staff. Shortly afterward, the magic circle was destroyed. "Goodbye, wolf pup," Lin thought as he cast an instant fireball, defeating the wolf pup. He then checked to see if Vivian was okay. After the pup's defeat, the ghost wolves also disappeared. The system congratulated Lin for defeating a boss monster, granting him a new title, Wolf King. He also received an ability that allows him to summon a pack of wolves to fight for him, as well as a new skill called Primordial Fire. Vivian quickly approached Lin and said that the portal ahead seemed to be the real one. Our protagonist was the first to inspect it. At that moment, Vivian noticed Lin's injuries. He had been fighting ever since they entered this realm. She cried again and tried to apologize to Lin, but he interrupted her with a joke about her apologizing too much. Holding Vivian's hand, he said that those wounds were insignificant and not worth worrying about. He then led Vivian to the portal, and both were transported back to the real world. A notification congratulated them for passing the test, and they also received rankings for successfully completing the task. Lin soon realized that his injuries had disappeared. After this incident, he discovered that there were only two ways to leave the experimental realm: complete the trial or die. Those were the two options. However, the students didn't need to worry because the experimental realm was just an illusion. Even if someone died inside, they would be transported back as if nothing had happened. Lin learned this information upon returning home, and reflecting on it, he was relieved that he had fought to escape, as experiencing death was not something he wanted to go through. After the incident, rumors began to spread throughout the academy. The students talked about how Lin had passed the test and even received an A grade. The student council decided to retest Lin's magical abilities. Many students eagerly awaited the results, and everyone was surprised to see that Lin's talent and affinity with the fire element had risen to an intermediate level. Many thought this was impossible, and one of them, already tired of the rumors about Lin, asked the other students to stop spreading them. The student council fell silent, and the room was filled with an awkward atmosphere. Augustine decided to personally verify if the news was true. Meanwhile, Lin felt a sudden chill just as he was in the middle of a negotiation with a merchant, selling 15 bottles of magical potions. The initial offer was 20,000 gold coins, which was already a high amount, but the merchant ended up offering even more. He also asked Lin if he could be his regular supplier, as Lin's potions were the best he had ever seen. With that, Lin left with a bag full of gold. Additionally, things were starting to improve. Lin planned to buy a larger habitat for Anno as soon as he returned to the Dragon Ranch. Finally, the long-awaited habitat was built, and the fire dragon clearly loved the new space. He dove straight into the lava, splashing it onto Lin, and then began to laugh as a way of thanking his master. Since Lin had built a medium-sized habitat, he received experience and gold in return. He also unlocked a new area called the Dragon Training Field. Both were excited about the news and decided to explore the area. While being transported to the new location, Lin was already imagining what he might find. He hoped to see a dangerous flight course and perhaps an arena for battles. When they arrived at their destination, both were a little disappointed. The system then explained that the training area would expand and become more challenging as they leveled up. Lin could even unlock the Dragon God Arena if he completed all the training tasks. As for the first challenge, the system informed Lin that he needed to shake the Dragon Tease stick 1,000 times. It was similar to toys used to entertain cats, but with a surprisingly effective result. The scary fire dragon suddenly seemed so friendly that anyone could pet him. But before Anno could have fun, Lin dropped the stick and complained to the system about the uselessness of the training. This broke Anno's heart, who thought his master didn't want to play with him. This scene reminded Lin of the times he also asked his father to play. Understanding Anno's feelings, Lin picked up the stick again, and the two enjoyed their training time. Anno continued to chase the stick while Lin made progress on the task. Despite starting to get tired after shaking the stick more than 700 times, Lin knew he couldn't give up, as it was a system mission. When he finally reached the 1,000th movement, something changed within Anno. For a moment, Lin felt as if a powerful fire dragon was watching him, and the pressure was so intense that he couldn't move. Anno then took the stick from his master. The system congratulated Lin for completing the test, explaining that the pressure he felt was Anno's new ability, called Dragon Fear. Lin also gained a new skill, as his level was sufficient. Dragon Fear has a small chance to paralyze any creature below Lin's level. Additionally, the training field was expanded. Lin began to imagine how this area would look when he unlocked all the parts and grew eager to experience the Dragon God Arena. He then told Anno it was time to leave. When trying to say goodbye, Lin tried to pet his fire dragon's belly, but all he got was a powerful tail swipe that sent him flying. After that, Lin continued his life as a student at the academy. Professor Isa kept her promise, and he was finally able to attend her classes. Some of his classmates started to like him, especially the dog. Lin hoped to finish the semester in peace, but while helping Vivian clean the library, he discovered something unexpected. He found a large magic circle hidden behind a curtain and immediately recognized it as his father's work. Upon touching the magic circle, he was suddenly transported to another place. Lin found himself in a room where there was a dragon skeleton bound by chains. He wondered why the academy would have something like this. A new mission appeared for Lin. The system informed him that he needed to fulfill the last wish of the sleeping dragon. This was the main task of the Water Dragon Egg mission. Lin needed to break the chains and help the dragon move on. Lin tried using his fire magic to break the chains, but the fire couldn't melt them. He decided to inspect the material of the chains, but as he approached the dragon, the creature awoke. The dragon began to struggle, and Lin thought it had turned into a ghost. The dragon then attacked Lin, and despite our protagonist's attempts to defend himself, his plan failed, and the dragon's attack was successful. He barely survived the sudden attack. It was really close. Lin started to back away, thanking the chains for saving his life, and then confronted the system, complaining about not being warned of the danger. While he was arguing, he heard the dragon's voice and, thanks to his ability to understand the language of dragons, he was able to comprehend it. The dragon seemed to be searching for its lost child, and Lin began to understand the situation. This was the reason the dragon hadn't moved on. Lin tried to communicate with the dragon, hoping it would listen to him. He asked a few questions, but the dragon ignored him. Realizing this method wouldn't work, Lin began to examine the room for clues and found a grimoire. When he opened it, something surprising happened. A hologram of Mr. Oliver and his father appeared. Lin discovered that the place was their laboratory, but as he flipped through the pages, he noticed they were all blank. He then remembered the book Mr. Oliver had given him and began to suspect that the book was the result of an experiment. Lin knew that, in theory, evil dragons should be eliminated, but his father had a different view, fighting against other humans to free them. He also recalled when Mr. Oliver promised to help clear his family's name, but since he couldn't prove anything yet, he decided not to jump to conclusions. For now, he needed to focus on getting more information about the place and the dragons. Lin left the magic circle and found Vivian, asking if she felt anything strange about that wall. Vivian only commented that Lin hadn't cleaned the area properly. Lin then started questioning other students about dragons, but one of them said there were no rumors about dragons at the academy. Determined to get answers, Lin went to speak with Professor Isa. When he asked her, she remained silent for a moment before responding that the idea was impossible, as dragons were extremely powerful creatures and no one would be able to bring one to the academy. She suggested that instead of wasting time on such legends, Lin should prepare for a special exam that the academy would give him. If Lin passed this exam, he would have the opportunity to participate in the Wizard's Trial Tower, a realm even more challenging than the Trial Realm. The Wizard's Judgment Tower was famous for its extreme difficulty and was created by the Academy's only Sage-level mage, Dean Gladstone. Inside the tower, dangerous monsters awaited, making it almost impossible to navigate alone. However, students who showed potential were selected annually and had the chance to receive special rewards, such as the Medal of Honor. Lin thought he had heard of this before. The professor explained that the Medal of Honor was a prize personally awarded by the king. Those who earned it had the right to teach at the academy and even the opportunity to study in the Imperial Library. She also mentioned that Lin would have a better chance of learning about dragons if he had access to the Imperial Library. The protagonist realized that this could be a valuable clue, perhaps the key to unraveling the mystery of the dragon and the grimoire. With this in mind, Lin eagerly asked the professor about the details of the extra exam. She explained that he would have to defeat her in a battle. Just by looking at the ranking, Lin already knew he was at a disadvantage since his professor was a 6th-tier mage, while he was only a 3rd-tier mage. Before he could protest, the professor clarified that she would suppress her powers to match his. She also gave him a month to prepare and said she looked forward to seeing his performance. Soon after, the system presented a new mission. Lin needed to defeat his professor without using any dragon magic. Back at his home, Lin reflected on the challenge of facing a 6th-tier professor, and although the idea seemed fair at first, he was still at a disadvantage. Isa's knowledge of magic was far more advanced than his, and in addition, her attribute was water, which made the situation even more difficult for Lin. However, giving up was not an option. He dedicated his time to learning and researching ways to counter water magic. He also began studying advanced fire magic, and the system assisted him in the process, but it still wasn't enough. Lin asked Dano to help him with his training, and as they trained together, he became more agile and skilled with fire magic, as well as stronger. Lin also appreciated that he was getting closer to Ano. After a month of intense training, the day of the exam finally arrived. Some students still doubted that Lin had any chance, while Vivian was busy defending his reputation. The battle was about to begin, and the first person to be hit by magic or expelled from the circle would lose. The two started casting their spells. Lin fired several fireballs, while Isa countered with water balls. The spells collided, but Isa managed to create more water balls, and even with her powers suppressed, she still dominated Lin. Without giving him time to rest, she cast another spell called Silver Fury, Snake Dance. In response, Lin used a spinning fire move called Ring of Fire, which managed to evaporate Isa's attack. She began to praise Lin for his understanding of magical attributes, but it still wasn't enough. Isa then cast another 3rd-tier water spell called Countercurrent, and Lin countered with a third-tier fire spell called Fountain of Fire. The spells clashed, but eventually, Lin's Fountain of Fire started being pushed back. The audience was impressed because Lin had done very well up to that point. Professor Isa thought her student was about to give up, but Lin's determined look indicated otherwise. He intentionally pulled back his fire spell to direct the water upwards, controlling both spells in a single movement. Then, several fire spells appeared around Isa. Lin thanked her for giving him enough time to prepare this special spell. He then unleashed his biggest fire spell, Meteoric Fire Cascade. As the powerful fireballs approached the professor, she praised her student, acknowledging that a spell of this magnitude was practically impossible for a third-tier mage to master. A massive explosion occurred on the battlefield, and the audience began to applaud Lin. But when the dust settled, they discovered that Professor Isa was unharmed. She was already casting her counterspell, called Night Bloom Illusion. The students were surprised, including Vivian. One of the classmates explained that only those who had made a pact with the water spirit could use that spell. Lin began to suspect that the spell was really of a higher tier. Isa then warned Lin that if he continued to wait, her spell would be completed, and the entire arena would be engulfed by her magic. A huge wave of water surged towards Lin, who remembered that the white wolf pup was immune to magic. He considered that the professor's spell might work similarly. With no secret techniques left, Lin jumped towards Isa and unleashed his fire fist, catching her by surprise. She didn't expect Lin to come up with this strategy. As soon as Lin broke the barrier, he cast another fire spell, called Fire Serpent. Isa countered with her Waterfall ability, which overpowered Lin, leaving him with no chance to react. The impact sent him flying against the wall. Vivian and the dog thought their friend had lost, but then Isa spoke, admitting that she had lost the match. Lin had forced her to use higher-tier magic, and she recognized him as a true opponent. Now, Isa was eager to see Lin's growth in the future. She admitted defeat and announced that Lin was the winner. With this, our protagonist passed the exam and completed another mission related to the water dragon egg. After this event, the day arrived when the king visited the academy. Lin was among the students fortunate enough to see His Majesty in person. The king greeted them and said they were the pillars of the empire's future. He also showed them the Medal of Honor, which they could receive upon completing the trial tower. With this, the students' spirits were lifted, and now everyone was determined to do their best to earn this special recognition. Shortly after, a line formed to enter the tower, and some students still doubted Lin's abilities. Professor Isa, who had witnessed his battle, appeared to defend him. A student in the back also became interested in Lin. This girl, who initially doubted him, ended up becoming a member of the student council and was quite close to President Augustine. Lin remembered Augustine and wondered how he could defeat him. The previous mission to defeat Augustine reappeared in his mind, something he had already forgotten. The examiner then called his name, and the protagonist entered the portal, being transported to the other side. Lin was taken to the first floor of the wizard's judgment tower. He thought the place looked like another world. Before entering, he received a map from his professor. The tower consisted of 9 floors, and the first 3 had teleportation points. In these areas, there were no magical beasts guarding them. In short, they were safe points. Students would only be eliminated if a magical beast killed them or if they were killed by another student. Lin began accumulating points by defeating magical beasts and quickly reached the 3rd floor. He then used the teleportation point on the 3rd floor to advance further, being transported to the 4th floor. Lin knew that from that point on, he would need to be more cautious. Meanwhile, outside the tower, the king waited patiently, and Professor Yushu was also observing. They couldn't see what was happening inside, but they could track the students' positions thanks to the lanterns outside the tower. At that moment, most of the students were already on the 4th floor. The wizard's trial tower was divided into 3 parts. The first 3 floors were the easiest, where students only needed to defeat magical beasts. From the 4th to the 6th floor, students needed to complete tasks, and half of them would be eliminated at this stage. On the last 3 floors, they would need to defeat 9th-tier magical beasts. Professor Isa was now wondering how far Lin would be able to go. Back to our protagonist, The condition to advance on the fourth floor was revealed. Students needed to defeat a magical beast, and each one was worth 200 points. To move on to the next round, students needed to score at least 1,000 points, but those who defeated other students would lose 1,000 points. Lin began to plan his strategy for this floor. He knew he needed to defeat the magical beasts before any other student did to secure his points. As he hurried, Lin let his guard down, and this was the perfect moment for a mysterious man to attack him. He threw a magic vial at Lin and shot a fireball, causing the vial to explode. A mist enveloped the protagonist, who was confused since students would only lose points if they defeated other students. Lin tried to escape, but the man's plan succeeded. Lin had been marked 10 minutes earlier by a group led by Augustine. This group was irritated because their leader was focused on Lin. One of the members wanted Augustine's recognition and even challenged him to a duel, claiming to be a fourth-tier mage. However, Augustine refused the duel, saying that he was too weak. Irritated, the man made a bet with his leader. If he scored more points than Lin, he would earn the right to fight Augustine. Determined, he promised that he wouldn't let Lin earn a single point. Meanwhile, our protagonist was still busy searching for magical beasts. He spotted one, but it was attacked by other students. Now, Lin was struggling to score any points because whenever he saw a magical beast, someone else attacked it first. Only 89 magical beasts remained. Lin then saw these students killing another beast. He overheard their conversation and discovered that they were just following Lin and stealing the beasts he found. Knowing this was unfair, Lin grabbed the student who said that and confronted him. The other students threatened him, but he knew they wouldn't dare attack him because they would lose points. As for this student named Alan, Lin had no intention of letting him escape. With nothing to lose, Lin decided that he would take Alan down with him if necessary. Alan then told the truth. The red-haired man named Saren had instructed them to do this. Lin remembered the time when he received a similar signal. Alan was afraid of Saren, so he followed his orders. Now, only 36 magical beasts remained. If you like this video, please subscribe, leave a like and comment for the next part.